Good morning, everybody. Welcome to your second session. Today, we're going to be talking about key activities of the execution phase. If you were not with me earlier this morning, my name is Risa Fickett. I am a senior project manager in our Enterprise Project Management Office here at San Diego County Office of Education. So we are so happy to have you here with us this morning. All right. Again, if you haven't done so already, please take out your printed copy of the conference map or feel free to click that download button and make sure you download it because this morning we are going to be climbing those execution mountains and we're going to revisit this map at the end of our session. So keep that handy. Again, if you have questions, we're going to be using the chat a lot today. So make sure you have the chat window open. I'm going to be asking you lots of questions in the chat. If you have questions for me, please put them in the chat. If I have time to address them right now, I will do so during the session. If I don't get to your questions during our session, please click that pink Padlet link down below and put your questions in the Padlet, and I will take a look at those during lunch, and I will respond to you there if I don't get to you in our session. Okay, sound good? Thumbs up, ready to rock? All right, here we go. Awesome. All right, today we're going to be talking about the execution phase. So in execution, we have task monitoring, status meetings, status reports, and communication to our stakeholders. So that's where we're going to be spending a lot of time today. But before we jump into all of the lovely execution phases, I just want to talk a little bit about OCM, Organizational Change Management. So does this graphic ring true for anybody? Anybody resonating with this image here? Right? You ever offered this amazing solution to people and they're like, yeah, no, we're too busy, I ain't got time for that. Like too busy, pulling my load with my square wheels here, right? So in that chat, please think about a previous project that you had and you had this amazing tool, was going to fix their problems, save them time, save them money, but just your stakeholders absolutely refused to use it. So tell me a little bit about what that project was and why your stakeholders resisted the change that you think. So many people are afraid of change no matter what it is. Yes, very true. What else we got? Really, you guys have never had projects where your stakeholders resisted the change, huh? Good for you. I'm not a computer person. News overwhelming, yes. It's always been done this way. That's a favorite, yes. Don't fix it if it isn't broken. They're already overwhelmed. People are set in their ways. Retired on duty, right? They love paper. It's work to change, it is. The process was broken fundamentally, okay. Not enough skills, no support from leadership, too many things at once, yes, that can be. Didn't understand, not looking forward. Yes, new is scary, I agree, 100%. All right, good. Okay, so those are all reasons why stakeholders resist change. So let's kind of even more reason, let's take a look at why we need organizational change management. So organizational change management is the application of a structured process and set of tools to manage the people side of change, from whatever the current state is to a new future state, such that that desired result of the change, essentially the expected return on investment, is actually achieved. And this comes from ProSci. And so really that's what we want to focus on a little bit. We know how to physically do our projects, but really one of the major obstacles is obviously getting people to change and adopt what we're trying to provide to them in our projects. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about OCM before we jump into all of the execution tasks. So as we said earlier, change management is really just a structured approach to implementing change. So it recognizes that change can be both painful, right? You guys saw that in the chat, a lot of pain in there. But it can also have far-reaching impact on the organization and the people who work for it. So really there are 4 key principles of change management. First, we want to understand the change. So for change to be effective, we need to understand all the ins and outs. For example, what it is, how it's going to be achieved, and why it needs to happen. Then secondly, we want to plan for the change. So this could include achieving our high-level sponsorship of the change project, as well as identifying those wider involvement and buy-in opportunities for all of our stakeholders. Then thirdly, we want to implement the change. So when you come to carry out your plan, you need to ensure everybody involved knows what they're doing, like a communications plan, right? And it may encompass addressing training needs, appointing change agents. I'll talk about that a little later about how we've used change agents for many of our projects, and providing support for people across the org and setting specific success criteria. And then lastly, you want to make sure we're communicating the change so that everybody needs to know why the change is happening, feel good about it, and understand how they can achieve success, right? What does success look like? So I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail. So principle one is really understanding the change. So here's some question to ask yourself and your sponsor and your team as you're planning to make a change. So the first question you want to ask is, what is the pain point, right? What's the problem we're trying to solve? What is it that we're hoping to accomplish? How are we going to solve this problem? What will the benefits of the change be to the organization, right? You have to be thinking about the benefits because we have to be able to pitch those benefits to our stakeholders. And how will it impact people positively, right? You all heard this phrase, what's in it for me? What's the with them? Always be thinking about the with them. What's in it for them? And how will it affect that the way that people work, right? You guys saw in the chat, lots of people are afraid of change. They like their paper. They like how it's always been done. So we have to think about how what we're trying to do is going to impact those stakeholders. And then what actions will people need to do in order to successfully change, right? Okay, so I'm using paper. What do I need to do to get off the paper? What am I physically going to have to do? So this particular change equation shows us that the combined pain plus the hope plus the actions have to be greater than the resistance to the change. So in essence, the pull to change has to be stronger than the urge to stay the same, right? So we have to combine all that pain, hope, and whatever action, and we need to make that greater than that, urge to stay the same. Make sense? Give me a thumbs up. Make sense to you? All right. So let's talk a little bit about principle two, planning the change. I am not going to go into a lot of detail. I love this model, absolutely love this model. I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail, and I will tell you why. Because one of my colleagues, Craig, is going to be telling you all about this amazing model tomorrow in the Essential Soft Skills session. So if you really want to go a deep dive on this, come to the Essential Soft Skills session tomorrow. But just at a very high level, I'm going to say this is one of my favorite models because it's really easy to understand. And I feel like we all have examples of missing components from previous experiences. So the gist of this diagram is really that you need the vision, the skills, the incentives, the resources, and the plan if you want to have a successful project, right? If you are missing any one of these components, then you are going to have I don't want to say problems with your project, but you're not going to have a fully successful project. And so really this talks about the vision, having that, high level support and sponsorship for the change, those skills, right? What do I need to do? The training, the incentives, why would I want to change, right? What's my rationale to do this? And then the resources. So the resources might be not just training, but it might be time to adopt the change. It might be support. There's all kinds of resources that are not necessarily financial. And then an action plan, right? We need help to get us from point A to point B. So again, fabulous model. I highly recommend you look into it or attend the essential skills session because they're going to do a little deeper dive on this. But it'll really, you can think about, in fact, do that right now for me. Think about a project where one of these skills was missing. So you guys were kind of talking about it in my earlier chat, but just real quickly in the chat, can you think about a project that you did, recently where maybe one of these components was missing and it impacted your project? So just type it in the chat. So like, for example, Perry put in the chat, if you are missing the vision, right, what happens? People are kind of confused. What are we trying to do here, right? Yeah, so Perry said too, so for the MFA project, people were missing the skills, so there was a little anxiety, like, I don't know what to do here, right? Yes, so heard anxiety for sure. Incentives, yes. So if incentives are missing, there's not a real reason to push for the change, and so you get some resistance there. Yeah, recruitment, yeah, vision, incentives, yeah. So you can see how if a single component is missing, it leads to kind of confusion, anxiety, resistance, frustration. You don't get the success you're looking for. So good. Keep that in mind. Again, come back tomorrow for more information on this. I don't want to give too much away because it's going to be a fun session over in tomorrow. So, okay. Principle 3 is really implementing the change. So you want to make sure that everybody involved in the change understands what needs to happen and why. So you really want to map and identify all of the different stakeholders that are going to be involved in the change and define their level of involvement. You also want to make sure that you're agreeing on the success criteria for the change and make sure that they're regularly measured and reported. Also, this is where I was talking about, you might want to appoint change agents who can help put those new practices into place and can act as role models for the new approach. So we've used this model twice with regard to change agents. We used it during our Teams implementation. So in SDCOE, we have 7 different divisions. And so we had a change agent in each division who helped their division with communication, training resources, modeling the change, bringing questions back to us. We've used the same model again in our Adobe Sign implementation. So again, working with each district to implement Adobe Sign, we have champions or change agents in each division who, again, help us communicate back and forth with the division, bring questions forward, take information back, and kind of help model and steer and guide the change for their department. So you could envision this working maybe at your schools, maybe your principals, maybe your office staff might help be change agents for some of your projects. Just something to consider. You also want to identify any training needs that have to be addressed in order to implement the change. Again, you want to identify this early. I mentioned this in my previous session. While you're planning, while you're building out that charter, be thinking ahead of what training needs might need to occur and be planning from them from the onset rather than at the end. You also want to find ways to change people's habits so that the new practice becomes the norm. When we implemented Teams in our organization, we used gamification. We found fun ways to encourage people to use Teams. So kind of incentivizing. And you want to make sure that everybody's supported throughout the process. So again, using training materials, communication, whatever support they need to make sure that they have those skills and abilities and are able to use it. So all of this really aligns with Kotter's theory of change management. It doesn't focus directly on the change, but rather puts the spotlight on the people who need to change and who are going to be most impacted. So if you're looking at that change model, right, you want to create a sense of urgency and then build that guiding coalition. Again, that's those stakeholders, those leaders, those change agents. And then you want to form a strategic vision and initiative. So people should be able to, identify with this beautiful picture of the future that you're painting. And then you want to have that volunteer army. So you want to get everyone else on board and driving to implement this change. You want to enable action by removing barriers. So you want to, again, it's identifying those risks. Remember in our charter session, we thought about identifying risks and how we're going to mitigate them. So we want to remove those barriers or those risks to people being able to implement this change. We want to generate short-term wins. So, maybe I'll just use Teams as an example. Maybe you're not going to use all of the fun, amazing features of Teams, but at least you held your staff meeting in Teams. Fantastic. Awesome. Good job. That's a small win on the road to full adoption, right? And then you want to sustain acceleration. So after that initial success, you want to make sure that we continue to press on and keep moving forward in the change. And then eventually that change will become institutionalized. We're going to institute the change. So we're going to identify those new behaviors that have been positive and continue to express and support them. So again, sharing those success stories of the change. So that's a lot around implementing the change. And again, if you want these slides, they are all available in Sched in this session. So you don't have to take a screenshot. You don't have to do anything. You are going to have all of these resources available to you in Sched. So you can download this after my session. All right. Last but not least is principle 4 about communicating the change. So y'all know this, but it's worth repeating. Communication can absolutely make or break your change management, right? People don't know what's coming. They don't know what to expect. They don't feel prepared. They're going to be scared and they're not going to adopt your change. So the change you want to implement has to be clear and relevant so people understand what you want them to do and why they need to do it. It's also a good idea to link the changes that you're planning to your organization's mission or vision statement to make sure that they're, getting this inspiring shared vision of the future. So that's why I wanted to share this ADKAR model with you. So it comes from ProSci and it stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And so this model comes from research in the 90s about transforming change in organizations. And they just realized that organizational changes often fail because employees don't understand the importance of getting on board. or how to successfully make the change. So they just know the change is happening. They often feel like change is happening to them. So this is about involving them, enabling them, and engaging them in the change. So again, this ADKAR model just really helps address these challenges by equipping you all as project planners with the right strategies and tools, and the right information to motivate and help your teams successfully move through the change. So, again, by outlining the goals of the change, you can really enable both your teams as well as your stakeholders to focus their activities on what's going to drive change for their org. So again, awareness is just really focusing on the recognition and the need for change. Desire is building that, enticing view of the future. And then knowledge is providing that coaching and training that people need. And then ability, this is kind of a critical one, is giving the time and the practice and coaching to facilitate people really growing their ability in this new desired performance. And then finally, reinforcing it. So that's providing that recognition of success, or correcting any possible failures to help reinforce the change. So really the first three, the awareness, desire, and knowledge help enable folks. And then the ability and reinforcement parts really engage and help them embrace the change. So it's a really cool model if you want to use this in your project planning to make sure that you're really hitting home, communicating the importance of the change that you're trying to make. Because literally the definition of projects is you're implementing something new. And by definition, something new is a change from the status quo, right? All right, I know that was a lot of information. How are we doing so far? So far, so good? All right. Awesome. So now we're going to talk about how organizational change management actually fits into the project charter that we are working on in session 1. So all of the models and components that we just talked about are reflected in our project charter. So the number one obstacle to success for major change projects is obviously employee resistance and that people side of change. So correspondingly, the greatest success factor for managing the people side is active and visible sponsorship throughout the effort. So you really want sponsor engagement. So you want to identify your project sponsor. That's a person who's paying for it, who's making any major decisions, who's really the champion of the change, right? And you really want to identify part 3. What are the objectives? What is that sponsor trying to accomplish? And how do we make sure that we're achieving those goals? And then coaching and organizational transformation. So that's all in part 2. So we have identifying change agents in each department that can help collaborate with us to make sure that we're aligning their processes with the new change. So I'll give you a real world example. We're implementing Adobe Sign right now. And yes, that can just be taking a paper form and making it into a digital form, but oftentimes there's a lot more to it. Creating the form into digital format is super easy. Changing business process about how forms are routed and rotated and how they move through the organization, that requires some business process change. And so that really requires partnering and some coaching to actually have a successful implementation of that. So just kind of keep those things in mind. Communication. So to make sure that we are building that desire and providing that reinforcement, we really need a detailed communications plan. And so we want to make sure communications are designed to ensure that the right individuals in the organization both understand the change, its implications, and when and why it's happening. So we want to make sure leadership's informed prior to employee messaging. We want to make sure that the communication is relevant, timely, consistent, and that we're using a variety of tools to communicate. So for example, again, in our organization, we've got an internal website, an external website, communications that our department sends out, emails, Teams chats. So lots of communications channels that you can use to communicate effectively with your team. And then training, again, you're going to hear me talk about communication and training all day, right? In order to build that required knowledge and skills, we really want to make sure that there's a detailed training plan as part of the change management. And so we want to make sure that the training's high quality, that we're giving high quality materials, that we're providing relevant information, that we're using effectively our training audience's time, that we're using lessons learned, and that we're kind of leveraging that existing expertise into what we're building. So again, the training comes out in identifying a trainer. So in part 2, when you're identifying who needs to be on your project team, make sure there's a training person designated on your project team. I said this earlier, but we got Barbara Thiss on our call. She leads our training team for our PeopleSoft team. And Again, it's absolutely critical that we're involving training at the onset when we're planning, not at the end, to make sure that we're addressing that. And then again, the training comes in as well in your deliverables as you're thinking about what am I delivering. That will help inform what we need to do training on. Same thing for our schedule. As you're building out your schedule, you're thinking about, okay, in my schedule before I go live, how am I going to fit in training, right? Building out time for that. And then last but not least, we want to talk about resistance management. So again, in our charter, as we're identifying those risks, we want to identify those mitigation strategies so that we can help ensure those risks are identified and allow for course correction prior to go live. So again, as you spend that time building out your charter ahead of time, it's going to help you to make sure you're addressing organizational change management as you're implementing your project. So again, the value of the charter is that it's going to help you later down the road. Whew, that was a lot of me talking. All right. I want to ask you guys a quick question now, because I've been talking for 20 minutes straight. What's a project that, well, I mean, once a project work has begun for you, how do you currently keep track of what's going on? So you guys all have projects, right? That's why you're here, because you're doing projects in your organization. How do you guys keep track of who's where? So we got a project plan, weekly status meetings, email, Yep, status meetings, spreadsheets, yep. Status reports. Yeah, Excel. Excel is our friend, right? Software, whiteboards, Slack channels, yes. Yeah. Kanban boards, Post-its, project boards, Scrum boards, excellent. Google Sheets, yeah. Yes, all of those work fantastic. Yep, project boards. Yep. I just love seeing all your guys' comments come in. Weekly meetings, spreadsheets, emails, yep. Smart Sheets, yep, that's another great one. All right, fantastic. So, yeah, we all need to do task monitoring. Here in SDCOE, we use Monday.com for our task monitoring, but you can literally, as you see, use any software you like, Excel, spreadsheets, Google Sheets, or Smart Sheets. There's all kinds of fabulous things to do. I did hear a lot of people talk about status meetings. So we're going to show you guys some clips from a couple of status meetings that my colleague Perry conducted for a project called the Statewide Reopening Dashboard Project. So the project team was made up of different units who are creating a new web portal and a new dashboard operating in a really tight timeline with a lot of moving parts. So in this first clip, we're going to show you the status meeting for a new project and brand new project team. And then in the second clip, which is a few weeks later, it's after winter break, and there was a time for demos of the work in progress. And what I'd like you to do as you're watching, please look for things that stand out to you about the way the status meetings were conducted, and then we'll discuss it after we watch. So feel free, as we're watching the video, just put in the chat anything you're noticing about the way the status meetings are conducted.
Everyone looks great, so I love the holiday backgrounds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Very festive. All right, everyone. Welcome. Did you eat your Wheaties this morning? I'm going to keep asking you that. We've got a big day as we're trying to wrap up and get ready for winter break for some of us, but big day because we're still pushing through on many tasks related to our project. This is our statewide reopening dashboard project, and just as a reminder, this is a Friday meeting that's meant for all of the team players. We're having daily stand-ups. We've done 2 so far. So today's an opportunity for us to come together and share out kind of big picture. Moving forward, once we get into a groove of these, ideally I would have the weekly status report ready to go to review also. That is something that we could look at. We're not quite there yet. So for today's agenda, what I thought we could do is start just by having a discussion that would really recap where we're at. So not the nitty gritty details of all the meetings you've been to, but kind of summing up what progress you think you've made in your group, or what's an accomplishment that you think is noteworthy to call out for what we've done so far. So that's meant to be a discussion for all of us first. We can do roundtable in the similar way to the stand-ups. So we can go from infrastructure first to then the work that we've done toward the portal, the dashboards, and so on. John has done some work around the requirements, and he's talked to several people. He's got a big master document he's working on. We're not going to go through page by page of that document today, but John's going to help review with us the requirements as they stand today. We're calling it draft version A, knowing that some things could change. So he'll speak for us and share out so we can ask any questions around what we're trying to accomplish and what the requirements are. I've got some logistic pieces with you to share with you, the OneDrive folder that I just shared with you before the meeting, and how time tracking will work. And then John is going to lead a discussion with everyone about what we think we can do next week. It's a short week. Some people are out, but just to get a sense of what next week looks like. All right, and before we leave, I'll make sure that everyone knows who's out next week too. Okay, so let's just start kind of the high level. And I thought actually, John, I was going to ask you first if you can just share out what progress or accomplishment do you think is noteworthy from your perspective? Well, I think we're going to wrap our first meeting. I'll send out a few notes, follow up in the chat for this meeting, and look for information about the time tracking spreadsheet getting updated. So I'm going to add in some more tabs for the individuals, and we'll be reaching out to you with additional information. Thank you, everyone.
Have a nice holiday, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah.
Happy
Have a
holidays.
great break for those of you who are off. Hi, welcome, week 5. We are going to have our weekly status meeting to get everyone up to speed and to talk through anything that needs to be discussed. Here's the agenda. So I'd first like to share with you where we're at with the project as far as our team size, how many hours we've contributed, just our overall totals. We've got some high-level updates from each of the area leads to share out where we're at. With the exception of app dev and our BI teams, they're going to go third and fourth with 2 more show and tells. We've got a web portal demo and a dashboard demo. So we'll get to see more of the good work that's been happening. We'll have an open floor time in case you've got a question, a comment, something that you needed to address. And then at 11:10, our goal is at 11:10 or sooner, we'll have everyone drop off, and Susanna and Tammy will share their dashboard recommendations on color and some of the user design recommendations for the steering committee to stay on and improve. If there's anything else that you feel I missed in the future, just ping me before the meeting and I'll make sure it's added to the agenda. But I did my best to reach out to everyone to get feedback and to make sure everyone's ready to speak.
All right. So thank you, Perry, for being willing to be our guinea pig and show your video. I know it can be cringy to watch yourself. So in the chat, if you haven't done so already, please type some things that stood out to you about the way the status meetings were conducted. So I've already seen some great comments. So looks like having an agenda, meetings and purpose, revisiting the goals, right? Doing a quick overview, having task owners. What else? Clear direction, purpose of the meeting, collaborative, allowing members to speak, yes. Focused, brief, positive. Manage expectations, respectful of time, organized and on task. Everybody's camera was on, yep. Having one person continue to run the meeting. Yeah, all great points. Very good, you guys. So again, just a little bit of an example of the possibilities for running a status meeting. And so now what I'm going to walk you through is some best practices that you already identified. So again, before the meeting, you want to make sure you plan the format, the topics, the pacing, etc. You want to make sure that if somebody's going to speak, you inform them in advance so they can come prepared. You know, there's nothing worse than being put on the spot at a meeting if you don't know that you're being expected to speak. And again, you want to create an agenda and send it ahead of time. So I like to put agendas or purposes of the meeting in the calendar invite so people know what to expect when they're coming into the meeting. During the meeting, you want to make sure that you're facilitating the meeting. You know, it shouldn't just be craziness. You want somebody facilitating. You want to review the project plan, listen actively for any updates, and also be on the lookout for any risks that might come up. And then identify new actions and who's responsible. So throughout a project, you know, new tasks are going to come up. We want to be looking out for those and who's going to take them on. And then at the end of the meeting, make sure that everybody understands what the next steps are and who's responsible for what. After the meeting, you just want to post or store the notes and update the project plan if necessary, and just make sure we're staying on top of any new actions. So if, again, any new tasks came out, we want to make sure those get added to the project plan. So pretty simple, not too bad. So that was a status meeting. Let's talk a little bit about a stand-up meeting. So for some projects or some portions of projects, you might decide that you want to do stand-up meetings. So for example, perhaps you're now in the testing phase of a project and there's a lot of new information popping up, and it's just more effective to get together to plan and address issues in a daily 15-minute stand-up. So that might be helpful. Stand-up meetings typically really short, so 15 minutes or less, typically on a daily basis, and just allows everyone to hear the current progress of every team member to address any roadblocks. So a couple of things if you conduct a stand-up meeting, you want to make sure you ask all attendees to be prepared, and you want them to share essentially, what did you do yesterday? What were they working on, right? What are they working on today? So what's happening right now? And then honestly, the most important question is, what roadblocks are in your way, right? You as the project manager or project team leader, your primary role is to eliminate those roadblocks. So you can't eliminate them if you don't know what they are. So a stand-up meeting is a great way to hear what's happening with your project team and what's standing in their way. Want you to keep in mind, it's really just meant to be a quick go around the room. Each person does a quick shout out, what they worked on, any roadblocks. Really important about stand-up meetings, it is not the time to solution or problem solve. You really want to use this as an opportunity to collect the information and let everybody else get back to work. And if you need to solution or problem solve, take that offline or into another meeting. So yes, I see people nodding their heads, right? So that if you solution or problem solve, that's a good way to turn a 15-minute stand-up meeting into an hour-long, should have been a sit-down meeting, right? Okay. So that's stand-up meetings. You can use them intermittently. They're more common in Scrum or Kanban type of project management, but they can be used anywhere. You can really hybridize and use them anywhere, even in your traditional waterfall projects. All right, moving on to status reports. I heard a lot of people in the chat talking about status reports. So let's talk a little bit about this. There's lots of different formats, but we're going to show you a little bit about the status reports that we use and the type of information we include. So I'll give you a scenario. It's Friday afternoon, and for our SDCOE Secure Access project, today's the day that we need to send out our status report to all of our project team members. So how do I get this information? I need to get this report out, right? So there's three inputs. I'm going to first look at my project plan, whether it's Excel or Monday.com, wherever it is, and I'm going to capture what was completed, what's in progress, and what's coming up soon. The second thing I'm going to use is my status meetings. So any information I collected in my status meetings, I'm going to include in that status report. And third, I'm going to collaborate with my core project team members to make sure that we all agree about the content of the report. So I take all of that information and I'm going to put it into my handy dandy template here. So I provide a status report that communicates literally everything that happened the week. And the picture you see here is just the format that we use for our weekly or biweekly report. So honestly, to save time, I just copy the previous week's report and then I update it and save it as the new version. So I'll take a little closer look and walk you through some of the components of this status report that we use. So at the top, literally the project name, right? Super easy. The second part, we put in the reporting period. So the date range and like, for example, if this is week, 1 of 7, I'll put that in there. I also put in my own name as the project manager. And then we use color coding in our system. Again, if you came to my earlier session, we talked about keep it simple for your color coding. Same thing applies here. So green means we're on track. Orange or yellow means that we might have a mild risk. There's a possibility we might be slipping from, let's say, our schedule. And then red might be a high risk, where there's a high risk of staying on time or on budget. So we'll want to identify that. So the top part of the report is also organized in the table. So if you need to change the color, you can just use the fill tool. Moving on into the body of the form, we list accomplishments. So this is where we list whatever we did during the week, and we used a past tense verb, like we completed the project charter. And if something major happened, we put that in first. So this is a great place to showcase all the great work that's happened during the time period. Next, we list what's in progress. This is what we're currently working on. So like working on the communications plan, working on the training plan. So that's where those items will go. And then last, we list any next steps. So these are things that are coming right around the corner. So like we're scheduling a meeting with the advisory committee. We're scheduling training for next week. Also really important is to keep an eye on your risks and mitigation strategies. So we talked about identifying risk early in the project charter, and then the status report is where we're going to identify any new risks and any new mitigation strategies so that our project team is aware as new risks arise. We're documenting it for them so they're aware of what's happening and aware of what we're going to do about it if it happens. Two other quick items that we usually have on our charters is we have a timeline at the top. So like it shows where we are in the process. And we often have an end of report appendices. So if, for example, in the Adobe Sign project, we have, we're working with our business services department and we've converted 17 of their 63 forms. We've got a beautiful little chart at the bottom that just shows how many we're working on, how many are completed, et cetera. So we just do a screenshot of that. So like I mentioned before, you can see how making a copy of the previous report and editing it can help you save time when you're creating this new report. And then I saw a question in the chat, what application? This is just Word. This is just a Word doc. So we're taking our stuff out of Monday.com or our status meetings and we're just dumping it into a Word doc. So super simple. All right. So that was a lot on status reports. Now let's talk about a little more about our communication with our stakeholders and our communications plan. So I just really want to quickly kind of define stakeholders. So it's really any individual, group, or organization that may be affected or may affect the outcome of our project. So again, if you'd open your chat, just quickly in the chat, type in for me, who are your stakeholders? Who are you doing your projects for or with? Yes, HR, teachers. Who else are your projects for or with? Leadership, parents, students, staff, yeah. School staff, business office, IT management, yeah. Yeah, a lot of students, lots of different departments. 80 districts, nice. Internal and external, business offices, school districts, yes. We have the same kinds of stakeholders, all of us. Yeah, I like that. Anybody who uses a computer. All right, so knowing that we have a variety of stakeholders, both internal and external. I saw a comment in the chat, project team members are less thought of as stakeholders. Really everybody, both on your project team, internally and externally, are all your stakeholders. And even our own employees should be viewed as our stakeholders. So let's talk a little bit more about how we communicate with those stakeholders. So first, we can set and manage expectations for our stakeholders by informing, right? So you'll notice that there's a yellow arrow here coming from the project team. I'm going to put on here, right here. Here's that yellow arrow, right? Project team going out to stakeholders. So that's really one-way communication. So that might be sending emails or putting information on a website, sending out a newsletter, right? Presentations, etc. So it's very one way. We're just informing people of what's going on, right? Another way to engage our stakeholders is really, and where possible, what we want to use is we want to involve those stakeholders. So here you see this peach arrow kind of going bi-directionally, right? This is two-way communication. So this might be conducting a demonstration, using surveys, doing a focus group or workshop, or roadshow. Opportunities for not just for us to communicate, but for us to get information back from those stakeholders. So like we mentioned earlier, you're going to increase the likelihood that your customers are going to accept the change and be excited about your project if you can manage those expectations from concept through delivery. So really, our goal is to get our stakeholders accustomed to change long before it happens. So we're going to share a few examples about how our EPMO engages with our particular organization's communications department for projects that impact all of our staff. So for things that we have that engage all of our employees, we engage with our SDCOE communications department. So they help us do really broad communications. So our first example is how we leverage our internet, not our intranet, our intranet. So our internal webpage that's just internal facing. So we've got banner images and blurbs that help highlight key details about a project. We use this for job aids, videos, or to just make sure people are aware of a key date. So for example, our PeopleSoft passwords are being changed. And so we've got a banner image to let all our internal employees know that they're going to need to update those passwords. We also have a calendar. So if we have trainings coming up or we're doing a roadshow or demo, we want to make sure it goes on the master calendar so all our staff can see it. And then we even have a newsroom. So this is where we can post articles, like the banner image might link to an article in the newsroom so that people can go read about it later. We also partner with communications for other types of articles that go via email. So we have weekly newsletters that go out, and then also monthly communications that go out. So we're able to partner with them to make sure that we're getting the word out using all of the channels available to us. All right, so anybody remember this? You might have seen this earlier this morning in Perry's session. Does it look familiar? Do you remember the name of it? That's right, it's the triple constraints. So quality is based on our ability to meet scope, time, and cost, right? So during execution, our goal is to keep our project in a healthy state. So do we deliver on time and on budget and within scope? Yes, Edith, thank you for posting triple constraints in the chat. All right, but as we know, while we're executing, sometimes things don't go as planned. So, there might be something impacting our ability to deliver on time, right? The parts didn't come in on time. There's a backlog. Our staff got sick, right? We're having trouble meeting that deadline. Or there might be something that popped up related to scope. All of a sudden we realized that our project sponsor's adding scope, or our customers decided they needed more scope. Or we might have cost related issues. So maybe the parts we wanted aren't in stock, so we have to buy something more expensive, or we need more staff and more man hours, and that's going to cost more. So again, in your chat, please tell me about a time when something popped up that negatively impacted your project and what it impacted. So, new scope requirements or missing parts. Tell me your examples of things that impacted your triple constraints. Yeah, absolutely, David. COVID has definitely impacted, right? Shipping constraints, timelines, new requirements. Yeah, shipping delays, legislative changes. Yep. The pandemic, supply chain issues, scope creep, parts on back order. Yes. Yeah, all great examples. Supply chain constraints. Yes, these are all things that we've been dealing with throughout the pandemic, right? Throughout our projects. Networking issues, exactly. Staffing issues, yes. All right, so what do we do about it, right? So we know that these things are going to happen. We have to be prepared to take action when things don't always go as planned. So here we have our fire extinguisher of things that we're going to do to help put out those pesky fires. So one, if a critical issue pops up, make sure you talk to your project sponsor as soon as you're aware of anything that impacts the scope, time, or cost. So for example, scope creep, scheduling issues, all the stuff you're putting in the chat, right? You want to make sure you talk to your sponsor so that you can agree around what the change is going to need to happen in order to accommodate those considerations. So if your sponsor decides on a change, you want to note that on the status report and inform everybody on the project team. And then you want to update your project plan, the documents, communications, etc. So, you thought you were getting monitor A and now you're getting monitor B because monitor A is out of stock, right? We just need to communicate that. You also always want to be on the lookout for potential risks. So you want to discuss those at status meetings and encourage staff to bring potential risk forward. So in that example, right, monitor A is backlogged, we can't get it, we're going to go with monitor B. What are the risks with going with monitor B, right? It might cost more, it might not play well with what other, the Mac products instead of the PCs, whatever it is, making sure you're thinking about that and documenting that. So, make sense? You with me? All right, home stretch. All right, so woohoo, the moment we've all been waiting for, we're ready to go live, right? So go live means we're going operational. This is happening, right? So what do you have to have on mind before you go live? Let's take a look at the scenario. So let's say for the last 7 months, we've been working on this project to implement a new student information system, and then next month is go live, and we've been working really hard, but are we ready? Are the users ready, right? So have we done all the testing and all the training? Okay, so if you are responsible for this project, what might be worried or concerning for you? What thoughts do you guys have around go live? We'll make this really quick. So what do you think about right before I go live? What are some of your questions? And I will try to wrap this up so we get you out of here on time and out for lunch. Are we really ready? Yes, absolutely. Are the users trained? Did something go wrong? Have we done quality assurance? Did we test? Yes. Did we train? All great questions, you guys. Did we do enough testing? Yes. Absolutely. All great questions. So how do we make sure we address all these questions? Why? We use a go no go meeting, right? We decide, are we ready or are we not ready? So before the go no go meeting, we can go through our go no go live checklist. So again, this list is organized around 3 areas. So we've got testing and sign off, the support team, and then training and communication. So I'm not going to go through this whole list with you. You again have this PowerPoint in Sched you can download, and so you can take a look at this. But again, this is a great little tool you can use before you go live just to make sure you can check all those boxes and you're really ready to go. So with that, we have completed all of the phases of the execution phase. Woohoo! Give yourself a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. You even got a little OCM and a little go live checklist to add to your execution phase. So you are set and ready to go. Please take a look at your printed copy of the conference map and feel free to check off and or list 1 through 4 how you feel about the execution phase. So we did the charter, the file repository, the plan, and the kickoff earlier, and we just did task monitoring, status reports, communicating, and go live. So we knocked it out of the park, 45 minutes, and you guys are experts now. All right, with that, I want to thank you all so very much for your time and consideration. Please enjoy your lunch break, and we will see you back at 1 o'clock if you're going to join me for the closure phase. If I didn't get your questions in the chat, please put them in the Padlet, and I will take a look at those during lunch. So thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy a restful break, and we'll see you back this afternoon.